This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Happy New Year and welcome to another year of A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you very much. I often forget to do this at the beginning of these programs, but I'm an old radio guy. This began as an audio-only podcast back in 2009. We started podcasting back in 2005. I keep forgetting. With the video thing, we got to say, click subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and hit that like button. And then thank you. We do appreciate that. Also tell you after the break how to guarantee that we never get canceled. That would be, of course, by downloading our free mobile app. Anyway, 2025, going to be an interesting year for a number of reasons. Number one, we've got Donald Trump returning to the White House. We've got a number of things that I will discuss over the course of this program that are lining up to make it historically very interesting. From a personal perspective, Sharon and I celebrating 20 years of podcasting in March of this year. We began PID Radio back in March of 2005, one of the first podcasts on the internet. Somebody the other day, a couple of months ago actually, called us the OGs of Christian podcasting. And I had to look that up because I'm so old, I didn't know what OG stood for. And now I realize it means original gangster and not old guy or old Gilbert, but thank you. I assume that was intended as a compliment. We started podcasting back before everybody and their brother was doing a podcast. It was a way for me to try to scratch the itch of talk radio, which is what I'd wanted to do ever since I was a little kid, but didn't have the technology to do until suddenly Adam Curry and Dave Weiner, back in the fall of 2004, invented the code that allowed for podcast audio files to be syndicated and then collected with a podcatcher. Apple caught on to this very quickly. This is where the iPod came from, and the name pod. This was during the era of the iPod, I should say, but that's where the name podcast came from, because they were audio programs intended to be consumed by people with iPods. You know, iPod is now a thing of the past, but now we're doing video programs and still calling them podcasts. So anyway, that's what we got coming up this year, sort of a milestone for us, because we never thought that this was something that we'd be doing full time. We just felt like we were supposed to be telling people what we thought about stuff and trying to share some of the inspirations we had for what we were writing at the time, which was strictly fiction back then. And it turned out that the books, the fiction, was to get us to podcast, which then brought us into contact with people like, well, our dear departed friends, Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Tom Horn, and many others, Ali Marzulli, Steve Quayle, and so on, brought us into their orbit, and that's what's led to what we are doing now. By the way, as you're watching this, assuming that you're catching this on Sunday evening or very soon after, major winter storm going through the central part of the United States, Winter Storm Blair. We're now naming them like we used to do with hurricanes. And we are out of the main blast. The forecast has been shifting all week long, as they are wont to do, because there are so many variables that our technology still does not have the capacity to fully analyze more than, say, 24 hours out. So all week long, we've been going from 6 to 8 inches of snow to some rain to now we're looking at maybe less than an inch of snow tonight and tomorrow. But as I'm recording this on Friday evening, the forecasts now are showing winter storm warnings across Kansas, central Missouri, southern Illinois, the Ohio River Valley. Most of Kentucky is going to get hit pretty hard. And the winter storm warnings have already been issued because those areas that I just mentioned likely to get hit with some combination of freezing rain, so an ice storm, and some heavy snowfall. Just checked the forecast for St. Louis, where our daughter still lives, and they're looking at anywhere from up to, as of the last time I checked, as much as 18 inches of snow. So this is something that's going to affect a good chunk of the United States, and they're already saying there are atmospheric patterns that are leaning towards another winter storm coming up at the end of the week, like this coming Friday. So we had a pretty mild winter through December, but now that we're into 2025, it's off to the races. Well, anyway, if you're in the path of the storm, central Missouri, St. Louis, the Ohio Valley, cities like Evansville, Louisville, Cincinnati, our prayers are with you, because Having lived in those areas and know what traffic can be like in those interstates when things get nasty, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Dayton, yeah, it can be rough. So our prayers are with you, and especially when you get into the hillier and more mountainous areas of Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, that can really be dangerous. So be careful as you are watching this. Again, Sunday night, Monday, the early part of the week is going to be pretty nasty. What are we seeing coming up in 2025? Other than another year of the same old stuff, there are a number of very interesting things that are worth discussing. And I've talked about this in a couple of other fora, so I thought what better way to start off the new year on A View from the Bunker than sharing a little bit of what I think is coming. I'm not claiming to have any special supernatural insight into this. Just I watch the news on a pretty much daily basis. The 5 and 10, 5-day-a-week news commentary for Skywatch TV. I wouldn't call it a newscast because it really isn't. It's basically, here's what's happening and here's why I think you should be watching it. Sort of a commentary rather than actual breaking news. But what I see in terms of things that are really significant in 2025 could lead this to be a really significant year. Again, Donald Trump taking office. I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. The big thing I think that we've been hearing as sort of a low-level drumbeat for the past few years is the creation of Central Bank Digital Currency. I talked about this on Hear the Watchman about a week ago Thursday. Talked about this on Doug Hamp's Prophecy Roundtable discussion just the other night. But this is something that central bankers, technocrats, have been pushing for some time. And 2025, for some reason, is a year that has been pushed toward or named repeatedly over the past couple of years by central bankers and by the programmers who would be responsible for designing and coding these digital currencies as the year when these things will roll out. And in 2025, we're going to see the two main economic blocs on planet Earth testing central bank digital currency. First, the G7. The G7 are the world's 7 leading economies, but really should qualify that. The world's 7 leading Western economies. The United States, United Kingdom, Japan, Italy, France, Germany. I'm probably leaving one out, but maybe South Korea, maybe the other one in there. Anyway, the G7 is setting up a trial run in 2025. This is called the Agora Project, AGORA, and this will be led by the Bank for International Settlements. That's the international bank that reconciles transactions between banks in different countries, facilitates international trade. 40 of the world's leading commercial banks are taking part in this. This is also includes the New York branch of the Federal Reserve Bank, which is interesting because the Jerome Powell, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, says that there is no way the Fed is going to, has no plans to get involved in a central bank digital currency. And yet the New York branch of the Fed is part of this pilot program led by the Bank of International Settlements and the G7. Central banks from Korea, Japan, Europe are behind this as well. This includes the Bank of France, which represents the Euro system. So the European Central Bank is not part of this, but the Bank of France representing its partners in the European Union, the Bank of Japan, Bank of Korea, Bank of Mexico, the Swiss National Bank, the Bank of England, and again, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, even though the chairman of the Fed says we're not creating a central bank digital currency. Well, yeah, but yes, you are. At the same time, the G7 is setting up a trial run, a pilot program for a CBDC. The BRICS nations, which represents the other major economic bloc. BRICS is an acronym standing for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but it's really now BRICS Plus because it includes Iran, the United Arab Emirates, may soon include Saudi Arabia. Venezuela would like to join, but they've not been accepted yet. Egypt is part of this. This is They are running trials of CBDCs in several of the BRICS member states. For example, in Russia, they want to expand these trials this coming year with plans to include 30 different banking institutions, these CBDCs to be used for cross-border payments within the BRICS community. In other words, they're trying to get around, this is another way they're trying to get around sanctions levied against Russia in particular, but also Iran, now that it's part of this organization, by the United States, NATO, and the West. The other trials that have been announced, United Kingdom, the Bank of England trying its own in 2025. The European Central Bank will be launching its own trial in February. China has been testing its own program since 2017. Japan, that would be an economy where you'd expect to see it because Japan is a very high-tech culture, but it's also a very old culture. A third of the population of Japan is over the age of 65. And I'm almost in that age group, so I'm not belittling anybody who is over the age of 65. But the fact is, you get a little older, you get a little less willing to trust your money as just a series of bits and bytes, ones and zeros. You like using cash because at least, even though fiat currency isn't really backed by anything, at least you can hold it, okay? So again, Japan may want to try it, but is probably going to run into more resistance to get a CBDC accepted. And again, here in the United States, not only has the chairman of the Fed said we're not remotely close to developing a CBDC, but in May, this past May, the House of Representatives passed a bill that would bar the Fed from issuing a digital dollar. And Donald Trump said during the presidential campaign, quote, "As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency," end quote. Why the attention on a CBDC? Central bank digital currency. Digital currency is really just the next step from using debit cards for all of your transactions. I mean, essentially, when you're using a debit card, you're just moving bits and bytes from one hard drive or from one ledger to another inside, the hard drives of the various banking institutions or vendors with whom you are doing business, whether it's a grocery store, the pharmacy, or what have you. Most of us use digital money, so to speak, in one form or another on a daily basis. This is similar to Bitcoin. And a couple of years ago, you might remember if you watched any of the Skywatch TV virtual conferences, the Defender virtual conferences, a couple of years ago, Guy Malone, our friend in Roswell, New Mexico, who is now a copy editor for Bitcoin Magazine and knows quite a bit more about digital currency than I do, did a virtual presentation titled, "Is Bitcoin the Mark of the Beast?" And, for people not really familiar with digital currency, when they hear about Bitcoin and this digital currency that only exists on hard drives spread out all over the world, volunteers who want to participate in the program can use their hard drives to help reconcile transactions, and in so doing, start earning Bitcoin in small amounts. To earn a lot of Bitcoin, you've got to set up these massive server farms that mine Bitcoin, and that's you mine Bitcoin, as I understand it, by processing the transactions. Use a lot of power, a lot of processing power, a lot of electricity, and but there are people who've made a lot of money doing this because Bitcoin has increased in value considerably from when it was launched as more people understand the concept and begin using Bitcoin for transactions. Thing is, you never have a physical asset called Bitcoin that you can hold in your hand. So you've got to trust that you will always be able to conduct your transactions digitally. And I've asked Guy about this. It's, okay, that assumes the internet is never going to go down. And theoretically, there are ways of continuing to use Bitcoin even if the web were to go down. I'm close enough to 65 that I forgive me, Guy, I still don't trust it. So anyway, I understand why people who've invested in it have done very well, and more power to them. But the fact that Guy pointed out during his presentation is that Bitcoin cannot be the mark of the beast for one very important reason. And that is that Bitcoin is by its very design decentralized. Nobody controls Bitcoin. No company, no single corporation, no single CEO controls Bitcoin. These transactions are processed all over planet Earth. Nobody can step in and say, we're going to shut down Bitcoin tomorrow, or I'm declaring an end to Bitcoin, or I'm going to program Bitcoin so that you can't use it for certain transactions. It is completely decentralized and therefore would not fall under the control of the future prophesied Antichrist. It would not be the mark of the beast because the beast could not control Bitcoin. However, this is not true of central bank digital currencies because, as you can tell by the name, central bank digital currencies. The central bank would control the digital currency. And as Guy pointed out during his presentation, which was very helpful to me in helping to understand how this could be used prophetically or in the fulfillment of prophecy, a central bank could program a digital currency so that it could not be used for certain types of products. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilbert, but that's religious propaganda. We will not allow you to buy this translation of the Bible or this commentary on Scripture or what have you. It could be programmed and tied to your medical records. Yes, Mr. Gilbert, we've seen that you've got some problems with your, whatever lately, so we're not going to let you buy this gallon of ice cream. Or it could be geo-fenced so that you couldn't use your Fed buck, your digital dollar, outside the boundaries of your 15-minute city. This is what central bank digital currency could allow a central bank to impose. Now think about China with the social credit scores, where if you're critical of the government, if you have an outstanding warrant, if you didn't pay your taxes on time, your ability to buy or sell could be curtailed until you took care of these outstanding debts to society. And that's what a central bank digital currency could lead to. And so of everything that's been proposed as a potential to become the mark of the beast, I would say the central bank digital currency is the closest thing to it that we have yet seen. And all you need to add to it is say we want to guarantee that your CBDC account isn't hacked. And so we're going to implant an RFID chip in the back of your hand or, the middle of your forehead or whatever. And that will protect you and guarantee that you will always have access to your CBDC account held at the Federal Reserve Bank or whatever. This year, 2025, is when many of these programs are being pilot tested by the most powerful economies on Earth. So just keep watching. When you see that acronym cross your radar, CBDC, just pay attention to it because this is something that will impact all of our lives in the years ahead. We've already seen some concern from people. There's a very prominent doctor. I'm not going to name his name because I don't want to pick on him particularly. He's just a symptom. He's not the cause. He was very pro-vaccine, very pro-narrative back in 2021. I probably shouldn't use the V word, but we'll be careful going forward. And he said that when Donald Trump comes into office on January 20th, he was very concerned about Trump's stance toward the World Health Organization and its bureaucracy, because he said the next disease X, the next pandemic is out there and it's going to hit like a ton of bricks on January 21st. All right, there are some who interpreted that as a threat, like he knows something is coming. I didn't take it that way at all. I've been following this particular guy that I've got in mind on social media just to follow the narrative for the last couple of years. And he's just very, he suffers from TDS. Trump derangement syndrome. So it's more of a political comment than anything else, a comment on the incoming president's competence more than anything else. But again, he's very pro, and so of course he's going to focus on that, because when you see every problem as a nail, then you really want to make sure people use their hammers. Anyway, there's already been a disease out there that's been referred to as disease X, which is rather inflammatory, because there was a Johns Hopkins University tabletop exercise prior to the last global panic that was called Disease X. Now, I am not one who looks at these tabletop exercises and panics thinking that this is how they're planning the next round of panic to impose government control. To be honest with you, I would rather have our military and our health bureaucracies actually practicing what to do if something bad were to break out. I mean, you don't want them having to suddenly figure out protocols on the fly. But using the term Disease X, which was a term that was invented for this exercise, to just give it a name, the hypothetical next disease that's out there that would become a public health emergency of international concern, which is the term used by the WHO, or PHIC for short, or for acronym. This was in Uganda and Congo. This popped up back in November, and there were about 600 cases and 143 reported deaths. Now that's a pretty high mortality rate. That's nearly 25% infection fatality rate, which is huge. I mean, the annual seasonal flu, the case fatality rate is something like 0.1%. So when you get something that you've got almost a quarter of the people infected are dying, that's worth paying attention to. As it turned out, this disease in Congo was identified as a severe strain of malaria, which many people in that part of the world are exposed to. And when you couple that with malnutrition, which is also a severe problem in that part of the world, people are not able to withstand the disease. Actually, malaria is a parasite. It's a mosquito-borne parasite. They're not able to withstand it as readily as they might otherwise. So in Uganda, there was a disease that was called dinga, which they referred to as the dancing disease, because it causes involuntary shaking, severe shaking. That makes it look almost as though you're dancing involuntarily. As of mid-December, there were about 300 cases reported, mainly girls and women, but that one not fatal. So the disease X that was in the news back 3 weeks ago seems to have been identified and is now being addressed with proper protocols to correct it. And hopefully the people in Congo supplementing whatever they are taking the anti-malarials with getting better nutrition. And I realize that's easier said than done. Our big problem here in the West is that we get bad nutrition, but we're eating a lot of the wrong stuff. They're just not eating enough of anything. So that was the cause of the so-called disease X there. But the fact that the Africa Center for Disease Control chose to call it disease X until it was identified, again, a bit inflammatory, and I think that was deliberately done, because the World Health Organization, Sharon and I talked about this on PID Radio a year ago, and credit to Sharon for this, because this is her area of expertise. She's been following news of emerging diseases since I've known her. I don't know if you remember back in 2020, early 2020, January of 2020, on Sci Friday, when we were still producing that program, we were talking about COVID-19 before practically anybody else in the corporate media even. And that's just because this is something that Sharon watches for and pays attention to. Anyway, she spotted this news about the World Health Organization and the amendments to the international health regulations that were passed at the WHO's meetings in 2024. Now, the IHR, the International Health Regulations, are a treaty that's been agreed to by just about every nation on planet Earth. This treaty, to which the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, every nation, I think there are only 5, and they're very small nations, have not signed on to, basically, with these amendments, grants the World Health Organization the power to become a global dictatorship. It gives the WHO power to dictate how nations, signatories to this treaty, will respond to a public health emergency of international concern, or a PHIC. But here's the thing. They're not just defining communicable diseases as public health emergencies. They are also, they refer to misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation as infodemics. And by calling it an infodemic, they claim the right to dictate what information is and is not to be allowed during the next public health emergency of international concern. So while we're looking at the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, the World Health Organization has actually, using public health as the impetus, set up the legal framework to become a global government, the infrastructure, if you will, of the Antichrist, a one world government. Now, President Trump has said that he wants to withdraw from the WHO. It's not clear to me that if the WHO were suddenly to approach the governments of, well, any nation, China, Russia, the United States, and say, you need to start submitting for clearance news releases to us so we can make sure that there's no misinformation or disinformation or malinformation being spread, whether those governments would comply and say, oh, sure, yeah, we'll give you the power to manage this infodemic. But the legal framework now exists and goes into effect in May of 2025. Geopolitically, the Middle East, Syria was a huge surprise to many of us. Didn't see the al-Qaeda offshoot, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, suddenly sweeping down and taking Damascus in a matter of days. But while the world's governments are now making pilgrimage to Damascus to welcome Syria back into the community of nations, the foreign ministers of France and Germany, as I'm recording this on Friday, January 3rd, just arrived in Damascus earlier today. The German foreign minister I saw got off the plane wearing a bulletproof vest, which says something about the reality. I mean, there are still some people who understand that Syria may still not be as secure and safe as its new masters in Damascus would like us to think. The fact is this: Syria is still divided. It is divided into a number of locations. The Sunni majority in the center and the western part of the country. The Kurds control the northeastern part of the country, basically everything to the east of the Euphrates River. Along the border with Turkey, however, I guess we're supposed to call it Turkey now, which is how the Turks pronounce it. There are Turks and Turkish-backed groups along the border in a couple of spots in the north. And in the very south of Syria, you've got the Druze. The Druze is a religious group that's basically an offshoot of Shia Islam, but they don't identify as Muslim. It's centuries old. They venerate as a prophet Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. At least that's how some have interpreted it. It's a very secretive religion, so getting a real handle on what they believe and what they teach is a little difficult, but that is what's generally believed about the Druze religion. The Druze communities in the Levant are split between Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. And this has complicated things because the Druze along the Golan Heights, Israel, when HTS took over Damascus, that's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the former splinter group from al-Qaeda. When they took Damascus, which is only about 40 miles from Mount Hermon, about 40 miles from the Golan Heights, the Israelis moved deeper into Syria and moved to within 20 kilometers, about 16 miles, of Damascus to establish a wider buffer zone, just in case the jihadis might get an idea of crossing the border into the Golan Heights and taking it back. The Golan Heights belonged to Syria until 1967 during the Six-Day War. Israel basically fought Egypt to a standstill in the Negev, pulled some of its forces back, sent them north into the Golan, took the Golan Heights. And they did that because it's called the Heights because it's the high ground. It looks down on the Sea of Galilee, and the Israeli settlements along the Sea of Galilee, like Tiberias, were being shelled. Mortars on the high ground shooting down at them. So from a military standpoint, you want to hold the high ground. Well, Israel has pushed deeper into Syria, and as such, they have, without intending to, I think, reunited some Druze families that were split after 1967, because you got some that were on the what became the Israeli side of the border and others on the Syrian side of the border, families that have been separated since 1967. So there's a half dozen villages on the Syrian side that have publicly declared they want Israel to annex their territory. They want to become part of Israel. Apparently, they didn't get the memo that Israel is run by, people who are trying to commit genocide. The fact is, they understand what the Sunni militants are about because they've been fighting low-grade conflict with them since 2011 when the Syrian civil war broke out. Druze militia have had to defend their villages and their territory against these Sunni jihadist groups. So, but here's the thing. Avi Lipkin said week before last on his weekly report, which he does on Zoom on Tuesday mornings U.S. time, and it's recorded and then uploaded to Aaron Lipkin's YouTube channel later in the day, that it's not just those villages that want to be annexed. It's also the Sunni area along the very southernmost part of Syria, which is the region around the mountain of the Druze, or Jebel al-Druze. And that region, according to Avi, would also wants to be annexed by Israel because they feel as though they would be more secure under the protection of the Israeli military than they would be having their own militia having to fend off the Sunni jihadists coming down from Damascus, which again is less than 60, 70 miles from Jebel al-Druze. I'd have to look at a map to be sure about that, but it's close enough that, again, they've had skirmishes and battles over the last 10, 15 years between these jihadist groups and the Druze. And there are a number of Christian communities in the south as well. So the problem there is that there is a Sunni-controlled group around the city of Deraa, which interestingly is the ancient city of Edrei, Edrei. That was one of the two cities that was controlled by Og of Bashan. It's a Sunni Bedouin city right on the border between Syria and Jordan. So in order to connect Israel to the region around the mountain of the Druze, they would have to also take in that city of Deraa. Although there's some discussion that, maybe Jordan would take that because Jordan is a Sunni kingdom. Don't know how this is all going to shake out. And that's kind of the point here. The world is treating Syria, or this government of HTS, as though it now controls all of Syria, and it doesn't. It doesn't have any control over the Kurdish regions to the east, doesn't have any control over the areas that are currently occupied by Turkish forces or Turkish-backed forces in the north. And, of course, you've got Israel occupying a little chunk alongside the Golan Heights, and the Druze in the south who don't want to do what the Sunnis want. So just because the leader of HTS, who was going by the name Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, he's now reverted to his birth name, Ahmed el-Shara. Just because he's traded his olive drab fatigues for a business suit doesn't necessarily mean he's now given up his jihadist and pro-Sharia law inclinations. And again, there's the Alawite enclave along the Mediterranean coast with a number of Christian communities in there as well. They don't want to be ruled by a fundamentalist Sunni government in Damascus. Neither do the Druze, neither do the Kurds, even though the Kurds are Sunni. There's an ethnic tension there because the Kurds and the Arabs do not get along. The Kurds and the Turks don't get along. The Turks and the Arabs don't get along. And the Persians don't like any of them. So there is a lot of tinder there that could be turned into a fire. And in the midst of all this, United States government, United States military was just reported yesterday, has moved units north to the border near the city of Manbij, Kobani, which is a predominantly Kurdish city that was one of the first to fall when the Islamic State broke out back in 2014. And is setting up, it's right on the border between Syria and Turkey, and the United States is moving up there to set up a base. So the Turks trying to pound the Kurds and the Sunnis have been skirmishing along the Euphrates River, and now the United States is sending some of our 2,000 soldiers still on the ground in Syria to the border between Syria and Turkey. And by the way, it should be pointed out that Turkey backed HTS in this play to swoop down from the northwestern province of Idlib into Damascus. In fact, after Damascus fell, the chief of Turkey's equivalent of the CIA was seen being driven around, chauffeured around Damascus by Ahmed al-Shara, the head of the group that had just captured Damascus. Okay, so imagine the head of the CIA going to another country and suddenly being taken around that country by the head of state, the prime minister or the president, whatever. This says something very, very important. In fact, the head of the Turkish intelligence agency was taken by al-Shara to the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which is an ancient mosque dating back centuries. And the Umayyads are the ones who set up the caliphate in what is now Turkey in the 16th century. Erdogan, Turkey's president, trying to put the caliphate back together again. And I think that the visit by his chief of intelligence to the Umayyad Mosque signals this. So, and again, I remind you, the Israelis less than 20 miles from Damascus, the Golan Heights about 40 miles from Damascus. Things are very close together there, and things, who knows where they go in 2025. We just pray that we got more time to keep preaching the gospel. In Israel, an interesting year ahead. Netanyahu just went into the hospital. He had to have prostate removal surgery. He is not a young man anymore, and I say that as a guy who's got a lot more gray in my beard than I did when we first came to the Ozarks 10 years ago. He's facing the same kind of lawfare that Donald Trump has been facing for the last couple of years. But while that is the case, he's navigating that legal minefield. He has still managed to preside over a war cabinet that has all but crushed Hamas. At midnight on January 1st this year, okay, the stroke of midnight, the new year begins in Jerusalem, and Hamas fired off a couple of rockets from Gaza to mark the new year. Bear in mind that they did the same thing a year ago, except it was, a couple hundred rockets. This says something about their reduced capabilities. The same and the fact that Hamas has lost both of its commanders, the guy who was in Qatar and the guy who was on the ground there in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, both eliminated by the IDF this year, as is the case in Iran with Hezbollah's leader being eliminated this year. And Hezbollah also now having to deal with the collapse of the friendly Syrian government, because being a fundamentalist Sunni organization, this is one thing that does benefit Israel. HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the al-Qaeda offshoot, not inclined to help the Shias of Hezbollah and Iran to help Iran arm Hezbollah to wage war against Israel. So regardless of what the Sunnis think about Israel, they hate the Shias even more, and vice versa. So the collapse of Syria as a transit route from Iran through Iraq, through Syria to Hezbollah is a major, major blow to Hezbollah. Now, in Iran, what is going to happen there? Will Israel launch a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear sites? Will Trump do it? Or will Joe Biden have them bombed on his way out the door? There's a report today that his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, has drawn up plans for Biden to hit Iran's nuclear facilities before he leaves office, January 20th of 2025, just coming up in just about 2.5 weeks. So will that be the case? Don't know. We will, again, pray for cooler heads to prevail. Don't want Iran to get its hands on a nuclear weapon, but it does seem as though Sharon was very insightful 4 years ago after the results of the election in 2020. She said it may be that Joe Biden is being allowed into this office strictly to get the United States embroiled in World War III. Because not only has Sullivan presented this plan to Biden or Biden's handlers, because I don't think for a minute that Joe Biden is actually making any decisions anymore. Not only is he looking at the possibility of launching a U.S. strike against Iran, he has been shoveling as much military hardware into Ukraine as possible on his way out the door as well, something like $64 billion worth by the time Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. And you got to hope and pray that behind the scenes, Trump and Putin are talking, saying, look, just be patient a few more weeks and then I'll be in and then we can put the screws to, we can apply the necessary pressure to end this war. Because Russia has already made it clear that with the approval given by the United States, United Kingdom, France, to use long-range ballistic missiles at targets deep inside Russia, that Moscow, Putin, the Kremlin, considers this NATO's direct involvement in the war between Russia and Ukraine. So let's just pray in the next couple of weeks it doesn't get real hot and Russia says, okay, that's it. Berlin, Paris, London, they're all on the target list now. I pray that that does not happen. Will we be able to travel to Israel in 2025? That's a very interesting question because American Airlines, United, and Delta have yet to resume flights from the U.S. to Tel Aviv. United has not said whether or when they will resume flights. Delta and American probably will resume in April, but we don't know that for sure yet. But United hasn't even announced when that was going to happen, whether it will happen. But Senator Ted Cruz said this several weeks ago, and I think is very interesting. Quote, the State Department may have become inappropriately entangled in deliberations over safety and subverted the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. There have been allegations about anti-Semitic discrimination by airlines, and that calls by unions not to fly to Israel were motivated solely by pro-Hamas activists. These allegations are troubling, and of course, American law prohibits American companies from participating in politically motivated boycotts of Israel, end quote. In other words, what Cruz is saying is that the Biden administration may have pushed the FAA to push the airlines or to go along with airlines who were giving in to activists within their companies to refuse flying to Israel as a way of harming Israel financially. And as we're coming up on, more than a year and 4 months now, I can't remember, a year and 3 months of this war with Hamas, the Israeli economy has been really hamstrung, not just by the fact that many nations won't fly into Israel, but the fact that many of the people who would normally be working at factory jobs, hotels, whatever, are now deployed. I mean, the archaeologist who took Sharon and me and Doug and Janelle Van Dorn to Gilgal Rephaim a year ago, March, almost 2 years ago now, he's been deployed to Gaza twice. So, I mean, you got archaeologists now who are having to redeploy as active duty soldiers, which is unthinkable. We Americans, we Westerners generally don't have a sense of what it's like to live surrounded by people who want to destroy your entire way of life and everyone that you love. But that's what Israel is having to deal with, and it's having to put its economic survival on hold while it tries to address that existential threat. Iran, by the way, its plan to use its proxies clearly has not worked as they would have hoped. Hezbollah and Hamas pretty much no longer an entity. Hamas, here's the thing. The fact that Hamas is still firing missiles into Israel at this stage of the game says that the true believers to their cause think that last October 7th was a good idea, and they would do it again, despite all of the death and destruction that has been caused to their own people as Israel has tried to root them out. But that said, the Ayatollahs in Iran have played their hand. As our friend Ali Siadatan has said, they're old men, and they realize their window of opportunity to strike at Israel is closing. So this gambit may have not only backfired, not resulted, it is actually resulting in Netanyahu increasing in popularity in Israel in the most recent polls, but at the same time, it may result in revolution inside Iran. I mean, the only ally, true ally that Iran has anywhere in the world is Venezuela and the Houthis in Yemen. The economy of Iran is at its lowest point, its weakest since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Ministry of Social Welfare in Iran last year announced that 57% of Iranians are dealing with some level of malnourishment and 30% live below the poverty line. People are getting sick of these old men who are imposing a hardline religious worldview on them. And I think there may be revolution in Iran in 2025. Here in the U.S., the next 4 years will certainly be interesting, if nothing else. Will Donald Trump be a good president in his second term? I hope so. I hope so. I hope that he can keep his, let's say, his desire to say whatever he thinks in check enough to be effective as a president. I think that he learned some lessons the first time around about how Washington, D.C. actually works. One of the things that I have learned over the past few months in researching the history of the modern state of Israel, and this is a book I'm working on right now, The Belarus Secret by John Loftus, his follow-up book to that one, The Secret War Against the Jews, John Loftus and Mark Ahrens, highly recommended. Highly recommended. Because not only do you come away from that book understanding that the history of modern Israel is not what we've been taught, you also realize that the U.S. president, far from being the most powerful man on the face of the earth, is really subject to what the people in his administration think he needs to know. And whether that man sitting in the Oval Office is sharp enough, shrewd enough to understand when people are trying to play him. I think Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman understood and had to navigate some minefields. They were inclined to help Israel, but they were also in a situation where, especially Roosevelt, in the middle of fighting World War II, couldn't really go against the oil men, because the oil men controlled access to the oil in the Middle East, which was needed to fight the war against, the war against Germany. Even though those same oil men were selling oil from the Saudis to Francisco Franco, the fascist dictator of Spain, who then turned around and was selling it to Germany for Germany to use in its war against the West, the Allies. So FDR couldn't do anything about it because he was literally blackmailed by the oil men who had very powerful friends in the intelligence communities. So That anyway is the point of what the point I'm trying to make here is that will Trump be smart enough to go against the will of the intelligence community and against those inside the Pentagon who resent the fact that he's back in the White House and who have a vested interest in seeing his agenda fail? I don't know. We'll find out. Democrats, will they figure out between now and 2026 or 2028 why the entire country shifted right in the last election? Don't know. Could be amusing. Will Trump fulfill his promise to send back people who entered the country illegally? Don't know, but it should be interesting to see. And again, will Trump be able to outmaneuver the deep state? I don't know, but at least he's had 4 years to look back at his first term, analyze what went wrong, and try to figure out how to avoid making those same mistakes again. Again, World War III, Ukraine, will Zelensky make a deal? Will Russia respond to Ukraine's use of British and American ballistic missiles? There was a top general that was assassinated in Moscow just a couple of weeks ago. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov and his assistant killed by a bomb concealed in an electric scooter. This general was the head of the Radiation, Biological, and Chemical Defense Forces. Don't know. Russia hasn't responded in a major way yet, and I just hope it's because they're looking at Trump coming back into office and hopefully some sanity returning to American and Western foreign policy. Here's the other thing. China, according to Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, his daily newsletter that I received this morning, there are reports out there that China is preparing to take back Taiwan by 2027. And will China take advantage of Western preoccupation with what's going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine to reintegrate Taiwan and take advantage and take over those high-tech semiconductor manufacturing plants? I mean, most of the semiconductors that run everything from your phone to the computer you're watching this on, the computer I'm producing this on, come out of Taiwan. So that is a big question. Every story that I've read about American attempts to war game the invasion of Taiwan by China shows that our ability, the United States' ability to defend Taiwan is pretty limited. Now, again, because of the semiconductor plants on Taiwan, China would rather take the island without bombing it. They don't want to damage the control those plants that make these really high-end chips. So there at least is that. I mean, Taiwan is somewhat protected by the fact that they've got what China wants, which is access to all of those semiconductor plants. But if it's going to happen sooner rather than later, because China's population is aging and shrinking. Like much of the world, we're just not having enough babies in the northern hemisphere in particular, but it's especially true in East Asia, China, the Koreas, Japan, Singapore, that part of the world, Southeast Asia, not having children at a replacement rate. And China is projected, and this is according to both the United Nations and China's own internal statistics, they're projected to drop from something like 1.4 billion people currently to something like between 5 and 700 million by the end of this century. They're going to lose half their people over the next 75 years, which means their supply of young military-age men is going to shrink soon as guys age out of effective fighting age. And this suggests that if China, which has said again and again it intends to reintegrate Taiwan to China, mainland China, it will probably happen sooner rather than later. And according to Colonel McGinnis, the reporting that he saw is sometime in the next 2 years. So we are living in interesting times. Two final things here as far as, say, religion or the Christian faith on planet Earth. And I bring this up mainly because the Roman Catholic Church is the home of about 1.6 billion nominal Christians on planet Earth. I get it. The formal Roman Catholic doctrine has some issues. There are unbiblical things that are part of the official catechism of the Roman Catholic Church. I get that. Just look at this from how this would affect the direction of the church and the influence that it has on those 1.6 billion. Pope Francis is about to turn 88 years of age, and he is growing increasingly frail. When he goes out in public anymore, it's usually in a wheelchair. And to that end, there's a new website that's been put up on the web, which features biographies of all 253 current cardinals, presumably including the new ones that were just created by Pope Francis, mainly liberals who were, more in line with his very progressive views of Christian theology. But special attention is paid on this website to the 22 potential candidates to succeed Pope Francis. So I'm not getting any special revelation on this, just saying, looking at his age and his health, that would not be a surprise to me if Pope Francis were to be replaced this year, one way or the other, either through his passing or through his stepping down because his health no longer allowed him to perform the duties of the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. So look for a new Pope in 2025. And finally, just as a reminder, and again, not saying there's any special dispensation or revelation here, not dispensation, a special revelation here. Feast of Tabernacles coming up this fall, October 13th of 2025. You might remember when Tom Horn's book, The Wormwood Prophecy, came out. We recorded some programs. This was before the new studio, so you may be able to find these programs still on the web. Sharon and I were talking with Tom about the book. This was recorded in the old Skywatch TV studio. And Tom had mentioned during the broadcast that there are those who believe that the arrival of wormwood in Revelation chapter 8 marks the midpoint of the 7-year period called the Great Tribulation. Now, and then he mentioned that this would be arriving, or asteroid Apophis, which is what he believes wormwood is, that asteroid Apophis will make its near pass of planet Earth on April 13th of 2029, which is during Passover. So knowing that there were two major feasts, in the two biggest feasts in the Jewish calendar, the fall and the spring, Passover in the spring, the fall feast is really the major festival, and that's Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. So I quickly did some checking on the calendar and found that, sure enough, you back up 3.5 years, again, from the midpoint, assuming that this theory is correct. There's no biblical, there's nothing in the book of Revelation that says that wormwood arrives halfway through that 7-year period. Again, this is just what some end times Bible prophecy experts believe. If that is correct, so that's an assumption, all right? If that is correct, then you back up 3.5 years, you arrive at October 13th of 2025, which happens to be day 7 of the 7-day Feast of Tabernacles, during which time 70 bulls were slaughtered. 13 on day 1, 12 on day 2, 11 on day 3, and so on until you get 70. 70 in the ancient Near East, not just for Hebrews, but in all of the ancient Near East, was a number that meant all of them. It was a symbol. It means the complete set, not one left out, all of them. Those 70 bulls represented the gods, small g gods of the nations, from which Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was rescuing his people. That's what the Feast of Tabernacles represents. Wouldn't it be interesting if, and again, this is a big, big if, this theory is correct, that this 7-year period of Great Tribulation begins on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, with God rescuing his people from the small g gods of all the nations by calling us out of here. I'm not setting that date. I don't know that that's what's going to happen, But it will be interesting. We'll be looking at those dates with special interest. Again, there's nothing in the Bible that says that wormwood arrives midway through a 7-year period of great tribulation. There's really nothing in anywhere, Old Testament, New Testament, where you basically just have to look at the timeline, and there are some teachers who've arrived at that conclusion. Don't know whether I even agree with it, but just something to keep in mind as we move into the fall season this coming year. And the Feast of Tabernacles, which was always a special time, and the Jewish festival this year, maybe we Christians paid a little extra attention as well. Coming up, a couple of new conferences to tell you about, and some advice for you. If you're going to rob a bank, don't do this, bless your pointy little head. That and more as A View from the Bunker continues straight ahead. Jesus declared that the gates of hell would not prevail against his church. But humans have tried to contact fallen angels on the other side of those gates since the Stone Age, and they're still trying today. Arm yourself with information. During January, our special offer features our new books, The Gates of Hell and Destination Earth, co-authored with Donna Howell and Allie Anderson. Find out where Jesus was baptized, why it wasn't where most people think, and why it was a declaration of war against the fallen realm. How the belief in ancient aliens is based on the New Age and occult teachings of Madame Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, and how Hollywood has effectively spread the ET gospel. Our 2 new books, plus the DVDs What Lies Beneath, about the world's oldest temple, Göbekli Tepe, and the 13-part teaching DVD based on the second coming of Saturn. This is a $99 value, but during January, it's just $45 plus shipping and handling. Only at gilberthouse.org/store. Talking the walk from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks every Sunday night since 2009. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net. That is our website, our global hub, gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org, DerekPGilbert.com, my personal website. Social media, you'll find us on X, formerly Twitter, at ViewFromBunker, at Derek Gilbert, and at GilbertHouse_TV. Also on Facebook, the View from the Bunker page there. It's a place to let us know what you think about these episodes. Truth Social, that is, and Gab, you'll find me there at Derek P. Gilbert. And of course on YouTube, at Gilbert House is the channel. Please subscribe, share, click the bell for notifications, hit that like button, and then guarantee we never get canceled. Here's how you do that. Download our free mobile app. It is available for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. All of our video content is there. There's also a messaging section where you can ask for prayer, offer prayer, ask questions of Sharon and me, share news items that may have escaped our attention, and more. It's sort of like a self-enclosed little social media site, because it's not on the web. It's just there in the app. And again, we encourage you to join us there. And the reason it bypasses the gatekeepers of big tech is because it comes from the Christian company that developed the app. All of the content, the media content, audio, video comes right into your device. And again, it is available for free at gilberthouse.org/app. That's gilberthouse.org/app. You can also add us to Roku, Apple TV, and now Amazon Fire Stick, Fire TV as well, and get all of our video content right there on your big screen. Well, if you're going to rob a bank, and I don't recommend it because, money is one of those things that people will defend sometimes with extreme prejudice, especially in a bank setting. Don't do it this way. In Hamilton, Ontario, police responded to a robbery at the Bank of Montreal branch where a guy rode up to the place on a bicycle. Rode up to the bank to rob it on a bicycle. Now, this is, I understand from those who know more about this than me, a not recommended procedure, because if you get out of the bank, the people chasing you are liable to be in a vehicle that is substantially faster than your bicycle. Look, he's getting slowly away. But what's worse is that when he went up to the teller and handed them a note, the bank employees had seen the guy ride up to the bank on a two-wheeler and didn't take him seriously. He tried to pretend as though he had a weapon. He did not. Again, I am reliably informed that if you're going to make a threat of somebody who is charged with defending lots and lots of currency, you probably want to make it clear to that person that it's in their personal best interest to do what you want them to do. But he didn't actually have a weapon. They saw that he was riding a two-wheeler, and so they just kind of laughed. And so he left the bank. However, his day was about to get even worse, because when the bank robber, the would-be bank robber, left that Bank of Montreal branch, he walked outside to find that somebody, you guessed it, somebody had stolen his bicycle. I guess he left it unchained because he wanted to make a quick getaway. That's, I guess, thinking. But he didn't stop to think that while he was in there holding up the bank, that maybe somebody else would be looking for a bicycle to steal. So anyway, he managed to get away from Canadian police, who are now looking for two suspects, a failed bank robber and a guy with his bicycle. Bless their pointy little heads. Conferences. The Christmas in Branson Prophecy Conference, obviously that was, more than 3 weeks ago, but you can still see all of the video presentations. I've got two as part of this collection. One titled The Gates of Hell. You get some great drone video footage, thanks to our good friend Aaron Lipkin, and explain why Jesus was baptized north of the Sea of Galilee, not down near Jericho, where people think, and why that matters. It was essentially a declaration of war. Also, my presentation on the secret history of Israel. It's really kind of an abridged version of the presentation because I gave it up in North Dakota. It was about 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think, before I stopped talking. But there I was limited to 45 minutes, but you get the gist of it. The things that we think happened leading up to 1948, it's not really what happened. Anyway, that and more. If you're interested in seeing presentations from the likes of L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, Ken Johnson, Josh Peck, Mondo Gonzalez, and more, just sign up at prophecywatchers.com and get access to all of those videos, prophecywatchers.com. In February, I am going to Canada to speak in Canada for the first time since we started doing all of this. This is the Men's 24/7 Discipleship Weekend, February 20th through 23rd. This was on the recommendation of our good friend Carl Teicherib. So thank you, Carl, for putting in a good word and setting this up. This will be at the Valley View Bible Camp in Austin, Manitoba. This is about 90 minutes west of Winnipeg. It's pretty much all day Thursday evening, all day Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday morning. And I will be giving 8 sessions during the weekend. So other events, guy kinds of things, as this is part of a men's discipleship weekend, but the theme of the weekend is Giants, Gods, and Dragons, Recovering the Biblical Worldview of the Apostles and Prophets. So I'll be talking about, giants, gods, and dragons, and why they're in the Bible at all, and why we should consider that if God calls them gods and giants and dragons, maybe we should take him seriously. So you can find out more at the website for the Bible Camp, valleyviewbiblecamp.com, valleyviewbiblecamp.com. Looking forward to getting up to Canada in February and seeing if I've got clothing warm enough for that time of year up there. We'll be at the Go Therefore Conference in Brookville, Ohio. This is outside Dayton in late July 25th and 26th of this year. More details on that forthcoming. And our tour of Israel, October 19th through 30th of 2025. We are hoping and praying that things will calm down in that part of the world between now and then. If you are interested, keep an eye on our website, gilberthouse.org/travel, gilberthouse.org/travel. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen to this program, wherever that may be. Apple Podcast, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Please take a moment, like the View from the Bunker page at Facebook, and follow what we do over there. Our announcer, the inimitable DC Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, not commercial, no derivatives 4.0 international license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Good night, Oliver, wherever you are. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is A View from the Bunker.